The sun scorched the sands of Karbala like a blade that would not dull. The wind, usually cruel in the deserts of Iraq, now stood still as if in mourning. The camp of Hussain was silent except for the soft moans of children whose lips had cracked from thirst. Among them lay a child so small, so delicate, that even the desert seemed ashamed of its heat. He was just 6 months old. His name was Ali, but in the heart of Hussain, he was Ali Asghar, his little one, his youngest, his last. Born in Medina, he had barely begun to see the world. He had never taken a full breath without the warmth of his mother's arms or the strength of his father's hand. He did not know war. He knew only lullabies, the gentle rocking of a cradle, and the scent of his mother's shawl. But Karbala had no mercy for children. On the 7th of Muharram the water was cut off. The river Euphrates, just a short distance from their tents, flowed freely, but its access was blocked by the soldiers of Yazid. The camp of Hussain was surrounded. 72 men stood against thousands, yet not a drop of water reached the family of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. By the 9th, the situation had worsened. The women covered their faces not from modesty, but from the dust and heat. Infants wailed, the animals cried. The children begged for water, not understanding why their fathers looked away in silence. Among them, Ali Asghar cried too, but his cry was different. It did not pierce the air, it softened it. It did not come from anger, but from a quiet, helpless ache. His lips were dry. His tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth. His eyes searched the face of his mother, Rubab, and then fell toward the shadows, slowly blinking in and out of awareness. That night, Imam Hussain walked alone under the moonlight. His feet dragged slowly, not from exhaustion, but from heartbreak. He had buried so many his companions, his brothers, his son Ali Akbar, all gone or soon to be. But it was the sound of a child's faint cry that kept him from sleeping. He entered Rubab's tent quietly. She sat on the floor, rocking Ali Asghar in her arms. She didn't speak. Neither did he. She held the baby close to her chest, her lips, whispering what might have been a prayer or a lullaby. The moment her eyes met Hussein's, the air grew heavy. "Ye Abdillah," she said gently. "He hasn't had a drop of milk in 3 days." Imam Hussain looked at the babies, face pale, sweatless, lips parted with silent thirst. He reached out and gently placed his hand over Ali Asghar's chest. His heart beat slow, but it beat still. "Give him to me," Hussain whispered. Rubab hesitated. She clutched her child closer, as though the arms of a mother could protect him from the fate of Karbala. But she knew. With trembling hands, she handed the baby over. She placed a small white cloth over him, shielding him from the sun, and kissed his forehead for what she feared was the last time. As the sun rose over the plain of Karbala, a silence fell over the battlefield. The companions of Hussain had been martyred. The banners had fallen. The swords had tasted blood. All that remained was the camp, and its ashes. Then, from the tent of Hussain, a figure emerged, not with a sword, not with a shield, but with a baby in his arms. Gasps rose from the enemy camp. "Is he coming to surrender?" Some whispered. No, others said, "He carries a baby. Perhaps he comes for mercy." Hussain stood at the edge of the battlefield. His face was pale from grief, but his voice was steady. He raised the child above his shoulders and cried out, "Oh, people, If you claim that I am a criminal, then what crime has this child committed? The enemy camp remained silent. He is dying of thirst. If you have no mercy for me, then at least give a few drops to this child. Some looked away. Others wept, quietly. But the command of Yazid was firm. No water for the family of Hussain. From among the ranks of the enemy, an archer stepped forward. His name was Harmala. He was known for his aim. He saw the child in Hussein's arms and hesitated. His fingers trembled. But then came the command. He raised his three-pronged arrow, the kind used for piercing armor, and pulled it back. Time froze. The arrow soared through the air, not toward a warrior, not toward a horse, but toward a 6-month-old child. In that moment, even the angels covered their faces. The arrow struck Ali Asghar in the neck. The baby shuddered once and then fell still. The white cloth turned red. Imam Hussain stood silent. He did not cry. He looked to the sky, then down at the baby in his arms. Slowly, he turned and walked back toward the tents, but then stopped. There was no grave. There was no cradle. There was no place to bury a child whose only sin was being the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He walked behind the tents, away from the eyes of the women, and with his own hands dug a small grave in the burning sand. His sword served as a shovel. His tears watered the soil. He wrapped the body in the same blood-soaked cloth and lowered it into the earth. And then he whispered something no one heard, something only a father says when giving the earth its youngest martyr. Back at the tents, Rubab waited. She heard no footsteps. She saw no shadow. But in her chest she felt the silence, and she knew. She held the empty cradle, her fingers trembling on the wooden frame. The cradle that once rocked with lullabies, now rocked with nothing but the wind. She did not scream. She did not faint. She simply rocked the cradle, as if her baby still lay within it. That night, as the ashes settled and the stars blinked silently above Karbala, the earth below had taken a child who never walked, never spoke, never sinned, a child who stood in the ashes of betrayal, and whose blood cried out louder than any sword. Ali Asghar had returned to his Lord, but the silence of his martyrdom would echo forever. Night had fallen on Karbala, but it brought no rest. The tents that once echoed with children's laughter now whispered with grief. The moon hung like a silent witness, watching from above as fire turned the sacred earth to smoke. Beneath that sky, Hussein's camp was no longer a place of life. It had become a graveyard without headstones. In one corner of that grief-stricken camp, a mother sat by an empty cradle. Rubab's fingers traced its wooden edges, her eyes fixed on the spot where her baby used to lie. The cradle creaked gently with the desert wind, as though still rocking her son to sleep. But Ali Asghar would not return. His tiny frame, once wrapped in the softness of white cloth, now lay buried beneath burning sand, hidden away by the same hands that once kissed him good night. She did not speak. She had no tears left, only silence. And silence sometimes is heavier than grief. Elsewhere in the battlefield, Imam Hussain stood alone under the open sky. The sword of Zulfikar hung by his side, untouched. His armor was broken, his body weary, his heart shattered. But it was not the weight of war that bent his back. It was the memory of a child, the moment replayed in his mind endlessly, the lift of the infant, the plea for water, the sudden silence. He could still feel the warmth of Ali Asghar's neck in his palms when the arrow struck, could still see the blood, could still feel how the body trembled once, then went still forever. That was not a moment a father could recover from. That was not a wound that could ever heal. The enemy soldiers had gone quiet. Even among the army of Yazid, whispers of shame crept like smoke between their lines. He raised a child, not a sword. He asked only for water. Why did we not stop, Harmala? But history does not wait for remorse. Karbala had chosen its path, and now even those who did not hold the bow felt the stain of its arrow. Some turned their faces away from the battlefield. Others pretended not to have seen. But no one, not even the cruelest, could forget the sight of that three-pronged arrow, piercing a child's throat. The blood of Ali Asghar had done what thousands of sermons could not. It had exposed the soul of the Ummah, and what it revealed was terrifying. In the women's camp, Rubab held a piece of cloth close to her chest. It was not a shroud. It was the same white fabric that had once shielded Ali Asghar from the sun. Now it bore the weight of his blood. She pressed it to her face, as if smelling it might bring her son back. Beside her sat Zainab, watching the mother crumble quietly. She had seen so many tragedies already, her brothers, her sons, her companions, all lost in a single day. But something about the death of Ali Asghar had struck a different chord in her. It was not just the loss of a child. It was the murder of innocence itself. Rubab, she whispered, placing a trembling hand on her shoulder, this child's blood will shake the heavens. Rubab did not respond. She did not need to dot in her silence. The truth echoed louder than any words. As the fire consumed the tents and the night bled into dawn, a strange calm settled over the battlefield. The storm had passed, but its destruction had only begun. Imam Hussain stood before the final prayer, his body drenched in wounds, his eyes searching the horizon. He had given everything, his brothers, his sons, his companions, and now he was ready to give his own life. But even in that moment, as the last act of sacrifice approached, his thoughts returned to Ali Asghar. He had buried him in secrecy, hidden the grave so that the enemies could not mutilate even the smallest of martyrs. But a father's soul cannot forget the earth where he left his child. He turned his face toward the sky and whispered, "O Allah, accept this sacrifice from us." It was not just a plea, it was a submission, a surrender of the most precious, offering the blood of a baby too young to even whisper, La ilaha illallah, and yet whose martyrdom would one day inspire the cry of Ya Hussain across centuries. Meanwhile, in the enemy camp, Harmala sat away from the others, his face buried in his palms. He was not a man easily shaken. He had fought many wars, killed many men, but what he had done today felt different. He had aimed not at a warrior, not even at a man, but at a baby. And not just any baby, he was the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. His blood ran from the purest of lineages, his soul untouched by sin. His cry still echoed in Harmala's ears. He tried to sleep that night, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw the face of the child, not crying, not angry, just still, as if asking, why? The arrow had left his bow, but it had not left his soul. Back in Medina, far from the blood and dust of Karbala, the city remained unaware. People waited for news. Some still believed that Hussein would return victorious, that Yazid could never dare kill the beloved grandson of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that Arab blood would rise in rebellion if ever a child of Zahra was harmed. But time would soon correct their illusions. Ali Asghar would not return. There would be no cradle to rock in Medina, only ashes. And yet, it was in those ashes that something eternal was born. The martyrdom of Ali Asghar was not just an event, it became a symbol, a cry frozen in time, a question flung into the heart of every believer. If the son of Hussein, the blood of the Prophet, the most innocent of souls, was murdered without cause, then what does that say about the world we built? It became a mirror. It became a wound that refused to heal. Years later, a man asked Imam Zain al-Abidin about Karbala, about the pain, about the horrors. The Imam said many things that day, but when asked which moment hurt the most, he did not speak of swords or chains or prison cells. He said, "When I saw my father lift my baby brother to the sky, asking for water, and instead receiving an arrow, that moment outlived the battlefield. It outlived the tents, the spears, the swords. It lived in every mourning heart. It lived in the lullabies mothers could no longer sing. It lived in the poems of lament. It lived in the rivers that still refused to flow freely. And it lived in every cradle that rocked without a child. In Karbala today, pilgrims walk the sands barefoot. Some kneel by the river, some stand by the shrine, but many, many find their way to a small area behind the main grounds. There, marked by no grand dome or marble walls, lies a small shrine, quiet, humble. Inside it, a cradle covered in white cloth, surrounded by tears, the shrine of Ali Asghar. No one speaks there, they simply cry, because they know. Some grief is too sacred for words. The sun rose again over Karbala, but nothing remained of its former light. It had witnessed too much. The battlefield was no longer a place of warriors. It was a place of silence, of scattered limbs, of tattered flags, and darkened soil soaked in sacred blood. But even in the stillness of that desert, one martyr remained more silent than all the rest. Ali Asghar, the one who had not spoken a single word in his short life, yet whose final breath had shattered time itself. It had been hours since Hussein fell. His body lay lifeless on the plains, trampled under hooves, stripped of dignity by men who had lost their own. The heads of the martyrs were hoisted on spears. The tents were looted. The women and children, including Rubab and Zainab, were herded like prisoners' veils snatched, dignity torn. The smoke of burned cloth clung to the sky. But amid all this, there was a grief that Rubab could not express in words. Her baby was gone. Not taken into captivity like her, not chained, not insulted, no. He had left this world hours earlier, in his father's arms. In a moment where hope was exchanged for an arrow. She had not seen the burial. She did not know where the grave lay. Hussein had hidden it with his own hands, burying his child in secret behind the tents, fearing that even in death his enemies would show no mercy. That fear was not unfounded. When the enemy soldiers began scouring the camp for spoils, one soldier noticed the disturbed earth behind the tents. He called for others. They dug into the sand, mocking, laughing, expecting to find hidden gold. What they found instead was the tiny, lifeless body of Ali Asghar, still wrapped in blood-stained cloth, still pierced through the throat by the arrow, still warm from the sun's unrelenting heat. One soldier flinched. Another dropped to his knees. Even the ones who had lost all sense of mercy felt something crack within. But cruelty, once awakened, does not retreat easily. They pulled the tiny body from the sand, lifted it high with wicked glee, and threw it alongside the other martyrs. The smallest head among those collected would be raised on a tiny spear, a horrifying sight meant to terrify the survivors. But it would do the opposite. It would ignite history. In the days that followed, the caravan of captives was dragged from Karbala to Kufa, then to Sham. The women walked barefoot. The children cried until their voices died. Zainab bore the chains of leadership in silence, hiding her pain to protect the others. But Rubab walked with eyes empty, heart hollow. She did not speak of her pain. She carried it like a wound, stitched with ash. One night, while the caravan rested near the ruins of a village, Rubab sat alone. She looked to the stars and whispered, "Ya Allah, did I not nurse him with my own body? Did I not whisper your name into his ears before he slept? Was he not from the blood of your prophet, peace be upon him? Then why did the sky not tear apart when they killed him? Why did the earth not open and swallow them whole?" She did not cry loudly. Because when pain becomes too great, it forgets how to scream. In Sham, when the captives were presented in the court of Yazid, he sat smugly on his throne. Before him were the heads of the martyrs. Among them a tiny bundle was placed near his feet. He asked what it was. "A child," they replied. He laughed. "Even a child?" Zainab stood, her voice like fire wrapped in velvet. "O Yazid, do not rejoice over what you see. For every drop of this child's blood, a nation shall rise. Every tear his mother shed will be recorded in the heavens. His death is not your victory, it is your eternal defeat." Yazid's smile faded, because even tyrants know when they've sealed their place in history's darkest pages. Years later, when the captives were released and returned to Medina, Rubab refused to live in any home. She refused shade, refused water in cups that were not broken, refused comfort. They tried to care for her, but how do you console a mother who never saw her baby's grave? She spent her days near the prophet's grave, reciting lullabies to the empty wind, whispering stories to a cradle that was no longer there. They say she never returned to normal speech. They say she died not from age or illness, but from a heart that forgot how to beat without her child. But history did not forget. In every gathering of mourning, Ali Asghar's name was remembered not as a child lost, but as a symbol, the final proof, the last, undeniable witness. They say that on the day of judgment, when the oppressors will be held accountable, and every martyr will stand with honor, a baby will appear. He will not speak. He will not accuse. He will simply hold the arrow, and it will be enough. Because truth does not need to scream when its wound is still open. Ali Asghar lived only 6 months. He never learned to walk. He never spoke words. He had no sword, no wealth, no army. And yet his martyrdom did what countless sermons, letters, and battles could not. It exposed the soul of a tyrant. It lifted the veil from a corrupted society. It declared, silently but eternally, "This is who you have become." In Karbala, Hussein's sword struck against injustice. Zainab's voice rose against silence. But it was Ali Asghar wrapped in his father's arms, lifted toward the sky, who became the eternal question burning in every heart. If this child could be slaughtered, what is left of mercy in the world? And so, in every Muharram, when the black flags rise and the morning drums beat like a heartbeat, a mother holds a cradle, a father lifts a white cloth, poet cries for the arrow, and the earth remembers the boy who stood in ashes. He did not march, he did not fight, he simply existed. That was enough to condemn an empire.